Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The Conservative conference where Brexit still dominates proceedings, even though it's not on the official agenda. Party members arrived in the morning to the news that Theresa May's speech on Brexit had sent the pound to a new 31-year low against the dollar. In the hall, the Home Secretary Amber Rudd announced plans for a new, tougher policy on visas for overseas students. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, reports from Birmingham.
Conference, mark my words, we will make Brexit a success.
Maybe the repeated mantras had sent him into a trance. While the leader of the Welsh Conservatives was slipping up, the pound was dipping to a new low. The markets have been poring over Theresa May's words here on Sunday, where she all but ruled out Britain being a full member of the single market. Today, the focus here has been more on immigration. David Davis, the Secretary of State for exiting the EU, talked about the possibility of work permits and said employers who want low-skilled workers from the EU may well be asked to prove that they've already tried to get British citizens to do those jobs.
If they go down a route of having work permits, for example, typically the way a work permit works in other countries is you've got to say, have you tried to get a British citizen first? And if you haven't, then you've got to do that first. So there'll be tests like that.
Theresa May thinks the referendum result showed voters want only the most talented immigrants coming to this country. And today, Amber Rudd, her successor as Home Secretary, said the government might restrict overseas student numbers by shutting out those applying to lesser universities.
So our consultation will look at what more can we do to support our best universities and those that stick to the rules to attract the best talent, while looking at tougher rules for students on lower quality courses.
People outside the education part of government tend to think you can draw lines between different sorts of universities. People who work on education policy tend to think that's a much harder thing to do than the Home Office tends to think.
In her speech tomorrow, Theresa May wants to focus on help for struggling families, traditionally a centre-left issue. But it's the right-wing ministers in her government who are the real box office on the fringe here. There's a real focus on Brexit and on immigration. And it's right-wingers here who feel they're now in the ascendancy in this party. You feel you've got your party back.
And many people here do.
But doesn't that mean that somehow the British voters who voted David Cameron in have been disenfranchised?
No, the Tory party is still there, and don't forget people vote for individual members of Parliament.
But it's a different Tory party now. You feel it in the hall, don't you?
Of course it is, because the leadership has changed.
The Democratic Unionist Party of the late Ian Paisley's in town, offering temptations he would never have approved of. MP Ian Paisley Jr. chats with the Tory Chief Whip. DUP MPs are here, cozying up to Theresa May's government. Is it possible we're looking at a new understanding? Pact even?
Well, I wouldn't use the pact word, but certainly will not be going out of our way to go against her, because she is, of course, adopting some of the policies that are already in existence in Northern Ireland. If you look at grammar schools, for example...
So she's now got a majority of 32 then, if you're with her. We still,
of course, will look at each issue on its merits, but in terms of the general direction of policy, there certainly seems to be a lot of synergies between where we're going and where she's going.
Not exactly where David Cameron thought he was taking his party, but the waters can cover you pretty quickly in Tory politics.
Well, while the government has been stressing the positives of Brexit, as we've heard, the currency markets have been far less optimistic. The pound has fallen to levels not seen in more than 3 decades. But the FTSE index of 100 leading companies has powered towards an all-time high. Our business editor, Siobhan Kennedy, is here. Siobhan, just explain this apparent contradiction between the currency market and the FTSE.
Well, it may seem confusing, Kathy, but actually it's quite logical. If you see here, the pound has indeed tanked since the weekend, and the Prime Minister's comments about Brexit and the perception that we're now headed for a hard Brexit, whereby we will pull out of the single market and be forced to negotiate the deals ourselves. Now, many investors feel that that will be, in the end, much worse for the British economy and for British businesses than if we'd managed to negotiate a deal to stay in. The flip side, of course, that has led to the FTSE steaming ahead, as you saw today, reaching a near all-time high. That is because a weaker pound is very good for those businesses who book their revenues overseas, typically in dollars, and then repatriate that money back to the UK, convert it to sterling, so they are literally getting a much bigger bang for their buck. That is why you've seen investors piling in today, buying the stocks of those companies. That's what's pushing up the FTSE. It's also why, Kathy, that good news feel is why the IMF today has upgraded its forecast for the UK growth for 2016 to now the fastest growth of any advanced economy.
Siobhan, thanks very much. John.
Well, when I spoke to the Prime Minister earlier, I asked what mandate she had to break last year's manifesto pledge of saying yes to the single market.
Well, on the 23rd of June this year, the British people were asked to give their voice, to give their view as to whether or not the United Kingdom should stay in the European Union. Parliament was clear. It voted 6-1 to give that choice, that voice to the British people. They came back with a clear message that they want the UK to leave the European Union.
Yeah, but the single market was not the question, was it?
They want the UK to leave the European Union, and that is what we are doing. What we now need to do is to negotiate the relationship that the UK will have with the EU once we have left. I want that relationship to be one in which there's the maximum possible opportunity for British businesses to trade with and operate within the single market in the European Union.
When it comes to those negotiations, why shouldn't Parliament be involved? It's surely for Parliament to determine what sorts of bits of the European Union we somehow want to retain a relationship with.
Well, we will be having, as I have recently announced, we're going to be putting before Parliament a great repeal bill which will set out the repeal of the European Communities Act, bring European Union law into UK law, so at the point at which we leave the EU, nobody will be in any doubt. Employers, workers will know what the situation is in relation to those laws.
But it feels very imperious at the moment, Prime Minister. Apparently, even before your statement on Sunday, there was a very cursory ring round of Cabinet members as to what you were actually going to say. There doesn't seem really to be very much democratic involvement in the actual detail of what you're doing.
Well, first of all, in looking at how we're going to negotiate leaving the European Union, I've created a new government department with the Secretary of State that will be focusing its efforts on that. We have a new cabinet subcommittee which brings secretaries of state together from a number of different departments to discuss how we approach this, to look at the process that we're following, to consider what we're hearing from sectors of industry, from businesses and others around the country, and from all parts of the United Kingdom, from the devolved administrations too. So everybody is fully engaged in the process of determining what the UK government is going to be putting before, doing in terms of the negotiations. But the negotiating party here is the UK government.
Well, you could argue that 48% didn't vote for this. How are they to be recompensed?
The majority vote was to leave the European Union. And, you know, as I talk to people around the country, as I talk to businesses and I talk to members of the public, the overwhelming message I get from people is that the vote has taken place, a clear message has been given to the politicians to ensure that the United Kingdom leaves the European Union, and they want us to get on with it, and that's exactly what this government will do.
Final question, Prime Minister. The pound is down, back to the sort of levels it was at the time of the vote. The IMF have just downgraded the expectation for British growth next year. Is that what the Chancellor was describing as turbulence?
Well, the IMF have upgraded growth for the UK economy for this year, and they have made the point that
but you know better
actually,
than it's for next year that's the worry.
But they have also made the point that the reaction to the Brexit vote, to the referendum on June the 23rd, was actually reassuringly orderly, that it has been more orderly than I think many had predicted. But both the Chancellor and I have been clear that this is not going to be plain sailing in the future. There will be ups and downs, there will be some bumps in the road ahead. But we need to go out there and negotiate the best deal for the UK and be ambitious in doing that. I'm going to make a success of this. The UK people expect nothing less.
The Prime Minister talking to me earlier.